Hello and welcome to this webinar, Mapping the Future European Hydrogen Economy. The webinar is organized by ESADE Business School and Law School based in Barcelona, Madrid, and particularly the Center for Geopolitics and Business, ESADE Geo, which I have the pleasure to direct. And which is chaired by Professor Javier Solana. I am Ángel Saz Carranza, as I said, director of ESADE Geo and professor of strategy. The webinar is also organized with our partners, actually our founding partners of ESADE Geo, the center, and our partners are Repsol, Fundación Repsol, Repsol Foundation. Today, we will be continuing our conversation on the energy transition. We have been developing, and we will continue to develop, a series on the energy transition, which is of a vital importance, as we can see daily in our lives. This is our third webinar on hydrogen, which is the topic of today, and the fifth of our series. We want to delve on hydrogen today, and in particular on where and how the hydrogen economy can and should develop. The future of the hydrogen economy based on its different components, the complex system of production, location, storage, transportation, and other matters. We have a fantastic roundtable to discuss the hydrogen economy, the future of the hydrogen economy in Europe. Our roundtable is diverse and will give us different perspectives on the matter. We have the pleasure to have with us Goce Mete from the Stockholm Environment Institute. We have also Maria Derugina from Repsol Corporation. And then finally, we have Monica Swanson from the Port of Rotterdam. So we have speakers from three very relevant actors, informed actors, active actors in the hydrogen economy and the future of the hydrogen economy. Unfortunately, Giulia Branzi from Italian SNAP, the Italian infrastructure operator, cannot make it with us today due to a health condition. So the structure of the webinar is the following. We will be giving the floor for an initial talk or presentation by each one of the speakers, who will set their basic ideas for us. And thereafter, we'll do one or two rounds of questions. But importantly, at the end of this webinar, which we hope or imagine will last an hour, we will be opening up the webinar to Q&A with the audience. Without further ado, let's start this webinar to discuss on the state of the hydrogen economy in Europe. And we're going to start with Goce Mete, Dr. Goce Mete. She is the head of the Secretariat of the Leadership Group for Industry Transition, hosted by the Stockholm Environment Institute. She is today talking to us from South Korea due to a work travel. She is specialized in hard-to-abate industry sectors. And she's also worked on stakeholder engagement. She has a project on oil and gas transitions in the North Sea. And of course, she focuses on hydrogen and carbon capture. She's also the head of research of the World Women in Energy, Climate and Sustainability Foundation. And importantly, she's a founding member of the Women in Green Hydrogen Network. So without further ado, Dr. Goce Mete, thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Very pleased to be here, and really look forward to all the presentations and the discussion thereafter. Let me share my screen. I wanted to share some slides with you to make this regulatory presentation a little bit easier to follow. Let's see. Yes, so we'll talk briefly today about, I'll present the latest developments on hydrogen from the EU, from regulatory background. And then I guess later in the day, we'll be discussing the future of hydrogen in the EU collectively. So you would be familiar, perhaps many of you, with the EU hydrogen strategy. It is a roadmap to 2050, but it has 3 key milestones. This is an ambitious agenda, and it is the key instrument to enable hydrogen economy in the EU. So by 2024, which is not far away at all, there's an ambition to employ 6 gigawatts of renewable hydrogen electrolyzer capacity across the EU, and also to replace existing hydrogen production. You might be aware that currently majority, over 90% of hydrogen used, mainly in ammonia and methanol and heavy industries, is fossil-based, coal-based or gas-based hydrogen. So the ambition for 2024 is to replace the current hydrogen use with green hydrogen. There's also, of course, an ambition to have a market for hydrogen, for which we would need a value, a price, and a market as we have perhaps as the gas sector today. And we need to start planning for the hydrogen infrastructure by 2024. And by 2030, this ambition increases quite a lot to today's like almost 44, from today almost 40-fold increase to 40 gigawatts of renewable hydrogen electrolyzers. And expand hydrogen use in steel and transport sector. In steel, Sweden's hybrid project will be operational in 2026 already, with direct reduction of iron using hydrogen. So new applications is expected to also appear in other places in the EU. Creation of hydrogen valleys and industry clusters is also an ambition. And by 2050, the EU has a target to scale up hydrogen for all hard-to-abate sectors. And then within Lead It, we also believe that hydrogen makes sort of the most economic sense and it's most best fit technology for this, what we used to call hard-to-abate sectors, but what we now call easier to innovate industries. So let's look a little bit on, okay, this is a strategy, a roadmap, but how do we make it happen? So today there's a robust process of revising all associated regulation, because as you know, there's no like specific hydrogen regulation yet, but there's a lot of associated rules and regulations. So there's a process to enable hydrogen economy by revising these. Some of that includes revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, a revision of Alternative Fuels Directive, which I'll mention a little bit more, a revision of the Gas Regulatory Framework, and also state aid guidelines, which may include some exemptions for hydrogen projects, perhaps in the form of carbon contracts for difference, incentive scheme, and of course, enabling a hydrogen infrastructure requires that we make sure that that we have an integrated planning across gas and electricity, because hydrogen it could be, and it is expected to play a role in creating flexibility between gas and electricity, but also making sure that renewables can integrate better into the energy system. So that requires a revision of our 10E regulation, which is for European energy networks. There's also, of course, a digitalization agenda. And then, of course, hydrogen economy and all these new technologies and investments to reach the tipping point will require a lot of investment. So the hydrogen strategy also commits to a pipeline of investments and creates a clean hydrogen alliance with the private sector, similar to the battery alliance that we have seen before. Of course, we need to also work on defining what is hydrogen, what is green hydrogen. We wouldn't need to do that if all hydrogen was green, but that's not the case. There are also plans for production of hydrogen with steam methane reforming and CCUS. So we need to kind of be able to define these products. So there's work on subsidy schemes for terminology, which will go hand in hand, and also demand side policies in end use sectors to create a market for hydrogen. So to be able to create an uptake in the market with offtake arrangements, so that there will be a need for support for that. I've mentioned already the transport, but there's also I think it's quite important that there's a research and innovation program to scale up electrolyzers. And this is exactly what is needed today to rapid scale up and deployment, especially with like targeted applications where we know that hydrogen could play a significant role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, like heavy industries. And there is also international cooperation going on because several countries in the EU are considering imports due to limitations in renewable capacity expansion and the scale needed for decarbonizing heavy or energy-intensive heavy industries. So there's an international cooperation in platforms like the International Energy Agency, IRENA, Clean Energy Ministerial, and so on, to be able to develop standards and definitions and regulations to be able to enable cross-border trade of hydrogen and benchmarking of the value. And the latest, so of course, these regulations are happening, but I think the latest push for hydrogen came with the Fit for 55 package, revising EU's 2030 target to 55% emissions reductions. And there's a new target within that for renewable energy, within that with the Renewable Energy Directive, that has a new target for 2030 for hydrogen, and that requires 50% of share of renewables in hydrogen consumption in industry. So that is also quite a significant target and quite welcome, I'd say. There's also a revision. I think these are the three most important, new developments on hydrogen from Fit for 55 package. The second one is the revision of alternative fuels infrastructure regulation. And this now will require hydrogen refueling stations to be available in every 150 kilometers. And that's quite important for enabling, opening up sort of transport and mobility opportunities, decarbonization opportunities for mobility, also for heavy trucks where hydrogen could play a significant role. And I think the CO2 emission standards, the revision of regulation for CO2 emission standards for cars and vans is also quite significant, because now it requires that average emissions from new cars should come down by 55% from 2030, and then by 2030, but then 100% as of 2035. And so that's quite significant, and that will actually require all new registered cars to be net zero compatible or net zero. So that's quite, I guess, important. So these are expected to enable transformation of the transport industry to become carbon free. That's my 8 minutes, but I also wanted to once again share the Women in Green Hydrogen Network. Please join us. We have a website, very active LinkedIn group, Twitter, and networking events. So look forward to connecting with you there.
Thank you, Dr. Mete. Thank you very much for this introduction to the regulatory dynamics happening in Europe. Following Dr. Mete, we're going to have Maria Deriugina from Repsol. So we go from regulatory framework and its dynamics to a particular case in point, Repsol's strategy related to hydrogen. Maria Deriugina is a manager of innovation, communication, and regulation of hydrogen at Repsol. She has previously worked in the international relations and the European affairs area at Repsol, so knows also the regulatory background pretty well. She formerly also worked in the business development of upstream oil and gas and LNG commercial division. She's trained in international trade with background in energy business and masters also in institutional political communication. So thank you very much, Maria, for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Angel, for this kind introduction. And I would like to share directly my screen to share with you some views from a business perspective. Okay, it's coming. Please just let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay, so I go. Okay, so I would like today to jump directly into the topic of the conference, which is topology of European low carbon, topology of European hydrogen economy. And because I think this really reflects the context where we have to set new business and to operate in it. So topology is concerned with the properties of an object, but under continuous deformations. And I think this is clearly the hydrogen image we can take. If we put EU hydrogen economy in the center, and then we can study the based on the examples of topological properties, we can just have a look on about the context. So I mean, the three main topological properties are dimension, compactness, and connectedness. In terms of dimension, it's clear that climate agenda and decarbonization goals set the energy strategies of the European Union and, of course, of the main organizations and companies. European Union clearly told that to achieve these decarbonization goals, it would need hydrogen, and thus it would miss this objective. And it sets the energy transition and energy strategy. So Repsol is in line with our commitment in sustainability, was one of the first oil and gas company assuming net zero emission goal by 2050. And so hydrogen is clearly one of the levers in our low carbon business and to attain this objective. So all the activities and investments will go to this energy transition period and to lead this energy transition. From the supply side, we already received some indications by the European Union, and also then which have been translated in national roadmaps across the EU, almost across all of the countries. And we have specific development targets by 2030, which is installation of electrolysis capacity to produce green hydrogen by 40 gigawatt by 2030, and in case of Spain, 4 gigawatt by 2030. So it already gives us an idea of some priorities. And also from, if you can see from the market, in the last 12 months, the speed of announcements of different projects is really high. And from the demand side, we also had received some indications, as just has been said also from the regulation update, but probably the most important one in this massive package of the EU regulation, the most important one, probably the 50% of hydrogen in industry for non-energy and energy use, 2.6% of RFNBO, which is mainly hydrogen in transport, by 2030, and also some specific goals even in aviations to produce and to incorporate more sustainable aviation fuels, of which synthetic fuels also has its minimum share. And as you know, synthetic fuels are produced with hydrogen and CO2. So this sets us the dimension. In terms of compactness, we think that, as we know, currently 90% of hydrogen is produced at the point of consumption. And only 10% is supplied by specialized companies, gas companies, industrial companies to the point of consumption. And so hydrogen acts as an industrial gas already for decades, but primarily for refining ammonia goals in hydrocracking, hydrotreating of fuels, so in refineries also very important. And so European Commission envisaged that industrial applications would provide these first use cases for renewable hydrogen applications, with later expansion on transport and other sectors. And so we think that we can leverage current hydrogen and production consumption activities and points to create the hydrogen valleys and ecosystems, because we think that this will provide the critical mass to the market, to making substitution of conventional hydrogen with the low carbon hydrogen. And so this will stimulate other new applications. One place can support the deployment of development of clusters, and in this cluster we involve also different players that across the value chain who can tap into multiple revenue streams and also maximize the utilization of shared assets. So this is why also Repsol developing this center in the hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen in industrial centers and clusters, which I will be happy to elaborate later. And the third one is connectedness. We can see that how hydrogen can connect and act as a sector coupling. And on the example of energy vertically integrated companies such as Repsol, we can see how it can complement and bring together different business lines where we are present, from renewables, fossil fuels, etc. And so it can play different roles and creating different business cases. For example, it could be buffer for renewable generation. As you know, one of the targets of the EU is to bring power generation, but make it more and more decarbonized and becoming more and more green. And this will require massive renewable generation. So hydrogen could be stored in terms of to store this renewable generation capacity. Also, hydrogen on its own, it could be alternative fuel for transport and fuel cells, etc. It could be feedstock for production of biofuels and synthetic fuels, combined with CO2, which also has interesting advantages in terms of existing infrastructure. We can use with synthetic fuels existing infrastructure, and even engines can take these e-fuels, because chemically they are the same that the conventional fuels. And also hydrogen derivatives like ammonia or methanol are also interesting products, and these interesting energy careers that probably on a long-term period, but also that several industries, maritime aviation industry, we are considering these applications, and research and development are on it. And so I think the hydrogen was an industrial gas, but now it really will be one of the low-carbon alternatives and will form part of the catalog of low-carbon solutions in future. So this is my perspective from business. I'm happy to listen to yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maria de Yogina, for your vision and Repsol's vision. Very complementary to the previous presentation. Let's move on to our next guest, Ms. Monica Swanson, who is from the Port of Rotterdam. Monica Swanson is the program manager for Hydrogen Corridors, New Businesses and International Portfolio at the Port of Rotterdam. She is specialized in and runs several hydrogen supply chain initiatives and covers most of the world: Southern Europe, Americas, Northern Africa, South Africa. Her areas of expertise are hydrogen, port development for green transition, and the digitization of ports. And we ask her to tell us how they are seeing the future of the hydrogen economy from the Port of Rotterdam perspective, an extremely relevant player in the field. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just pulling up my slides. Thank you, Angel. Can you all see them? I hope you can.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, not most of the world. I have to slightly correct you there. Just half, which is already a lot to be busy with. Yeah. Below me, I just need, there you go. Yeah, I thought I'd better first introduce our port to you. Most listeners to this dialogue, this conversation, are in the energy industry, so you're probably familiar with our port, because it is, of course, quite a large port and also a very important energy hub for the continent of Europe. You can see in this picture, it's about 45 kilometers wide, which in a country that is only 200 kilometers wide is quite substantial. The colors pink mark chemical and refinery industries. Currently in our port, we use about 500,000 tons of hydrogen, gray traditional hydrogen. And some 13% of the total energy consumption in Europe comes into Europe via Rotterdam. So that's coal, oil, LNG, gas, biodiesel, anything you can think of. And we're also looking at receiving the new non-fossil and low-carbon fuels of the future and the feedstocks of the future. From our port, you can see this little magnifying glass. We reach out into a large part of Europe. So we have a function there, and we have a lot of customers hoping we will be fast enough handling and distributing the energy of the future. I can reassure those customers already, because we think we are ready already at this point, as that's interesting. We expect, if you look at this chart on the right-hand side, that's like a graphic representation of expected demand, but also what we expect to import via our port, considering what we do now in traditional fuels and feedstocks and what we expect to do for hydrogen. This is where we, if you look at it closely, right-hand side, yellow sail, by 2050, we expect to be importing 20 million tons of hydrogen. And when I say hydrogen, that could be in the form of ammonia. It could also be power to X fuels. But in any case, the fuels of the future, a lot of it will be hydrogen, also liquid. But there's going to be a big change. And you have to imagine, for a port that's now currently doing like 40% of its handling in energy, this is a big change for us. And I understand for companies in the oil and gas, the so-called hard-to-abate sector, it's a huge change, but so it is for us. If you look at this is the hinterland of our port, and you can see that exactly our customers are in the areas that are now red and orange, which is the high demand areas for energy in Europe. So we're bang in the middle of that. So we have to do something to reach out to them and to make sure that we can supply these future hydrogen flows, which will be probably similar to the gas and oil shipping flows, only in some cases from very different countries. How do we manage this? How can we prepare for this? First of all, and this was mentioned before, I think by Maria and Gutje, you need good infrastructure. And this is what we do as a port. We provide the basic infrastructure for all our port community members. You have to imagine there's about 3,000 companies working in our port. So what we try to do is provide things that are important for everyone centrally. What you see here is the white backbone system. That's an open access backbone for hydrogen. That's already being planned. We have carbon capture and storage here, and going into a pipeline and carbon being stored below sea level. We have a wind park because, of course, we now already also have a large industrial cluster, chemical plants, refineries. That has to be replaced. We don't want to leave the territory sort of to the old industry and then not replace it. So we're working on the first electrolyzer cluster for 2 gigawatts with companies like Shell, BP, Air Liquide, but also a company like Uniper are going to set up an electrolyzer in another part of the port. And all companies working in our port are going to be connected to this open access backbone, that white pipeline you see here, where they can get their clean green energy from that pipeline system. And they can store their CO2 under sea level. So that's all happening. We're going to connect that white pipeline to the national gas grid, and also it's going to connect into a pipeline system towards Germany. I showed you that picture of the high energy demand areas, for instance, North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. That's an area we are traditionally servicing as a port, and that will be bang in the middle of that. Also to the south of the Netherlands and connections to Belgium and northern France. This is all happening now, really. This is going to happen between 2020, 2030. I showed you that graphic representation of the sale, the 20 million tons. Just imagine that only 2 million tons perhaps will be produced here and used here. But then we also need a ship. We need ships, many ships, because about 18 million tons of the hydrogen we think is needed by the hinterland consumers of our port. So that's really high demand energy and any users. 18 million of that will have to come in by ship because it will be produced in faraway countries where conditions for renewables are best. So the only way to get it will be by ship. There will be pipelines, but there will also be ships like in the current oil and gas industry. And what we're going to do then is to bring in those ships, have terminals, have everything, that whole infrastructure I just showed you, operational between now and 2030. It will be worked out in detail, and there will be, hopefully by 2026, a pipeline connection, Delta Corridor going into Germany, and open access system there. So that's all big plans, important plans, with which we hope to contribute to remaining the port we are, being part of a large economy for Europe, and also hopefully accelerating the change, because we don't have a lot of time left. So if we don't move, if we don't take action, we won't perform well enough. So that's our challenge here, and we're working very, very hard on it with a large team.
Thank you very much, Ms. Monica Swanson. Fascinating. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges in this brutal transformation that you're presenting to us. What are the main challenges in this overhaul, to a certain extent, of your energy system in the port, Monica?
The challenges, I think the main challenge I see at the moment is supply, because production in the world is still quite slowly starting. There's some large projects, but also very many small ones. And another challenge is the complexity of Europe, where people are really also sometimes waiting for a subsidy system to materialize. And it's very complicated. And actually, I'm beginning to think it's delaying the process rather than speeding it up, because, if there's a subsidy, you're going to wait for it. So that's one thing I'm seeing. And of course, a challenge also is in shipping, the fact that we are not sure what kind of fuels exactly are going to be used, for instance, in ships. Is it going to be methanol? Is it going to be ammonia? Is it going to be liquid or gas? Is it something else? So a lot of question marks still.
Thank you.
Uncertainty sort of slows people down. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Let's go back to Maria Derugina from Repsol. Perhaps, Maria, you can tell us a little bit more specifically about some of the projects you are developing in this field from at Repsol.
Yes, of course, Angela will be happy, and I will probably again share the screen, because it will be easier to show you some projects we are developing. So it's coming. Can you see my screen? Please confirm.
Not yet.
Now?
Not yet. I'm told that our backstage is not seeing them yet.
Okay, one second. It has been working. No reason that it doesn't work right now.
By the way, while we put this up, we are starting to receive questions from the audience, so we'll be happy to take them on in a few minutes. Maria. please.
Yeah, you can see. Okay, thank you very much. So about the project, as I mentioned at the beginning in my introduction, we are vertically integrated company, and so we have the several also refineries and petrochemical complex in Spain. And we believe we have advantages to create this critical mass of low carbon hydrogen needed and fostering new applications. And currently, I would like to mention that Repsol is one of the main producer and consumer of hydrogen in Spain, in terms of consumption, accounting more than 60% of national demand. And basically, as has been mentioned, in terms of for consumption based on our refineries. So for us, the development of low carbon hydrogen projects around the industrial centers where we can bring it together with our own consumption and foster new applications, I think is very important, and also from economic point of view, it's the most interesting project. So I can share with you some very recent information, because we just created our strategy and released it this spring. So news and new milestones will be coming in the next days and weeks. But I can share with you today that in terms of 2030 objectives, Repsol targets renewable hydrogen production via different technologies. This is an important one. So we are targeting 2 gigawatts of electrolysis capacity by 2030 and 300 megawatts of hydrogen from photoelectrocatalysis, which is our technology, new technology that we have developed with together with Enagas, and I will mention it in one of our projects, and from biogas. So we really consider all potential, of course, potential innovations and other technologies. So these are long-term objectives. And in terms of portfolio of projects with which we are now working and developing, we will be bringing one of the first also green, low carbon and green hydrogen projects in Spain, based on Basque Hydrogen Corridor in Bilbao, where our refinery of Petronor is in the center also of this project. There are many initiatives in this corridor, and we will be announcing different projects, but totaling more or less more than 100 megawatts of electrolysis. So it will be by stage, different electrolysis of different scale. So we're considering a variety, as you see, variety of users. So it's from the first one, which will be smaller one, 2.5 megawatts, will be mainly for some mobility users in the technological center, which is building right now in completing its construction in Bilbao. And also later on there will be renewable hydrogen for production of e-fuels. As I mentioned, we consider this could be very interesting. It will be a demo plant, but we are collaborating here with national companies, local administration, and foreign companies. And also we are targeting hydrogen production from electrolysis, also for our own consumption in the refinery and other new applications which are developing right now. Another point, which will be in Catalonia Hydrogen Valley in the port of Tarragona, and as you know, this is one of the benchmark chemical ports in Southern Europe, with different chemical companies and industrial industries in the port. And Tarragona Refinery is also leading these initiatives, and they will be also targeting the installation of electrolysis of more than 100 megawatt there. For as I mentioned, for petrochemical use, also for some mobility, probably on the next stage. In Castilla-La Mancha, and hydrogen cluster, which is probably also is building there around Puerto Llano complex, and here we will be putting a demonstration plant of photoelectrocatalysis, the technology that we developed with Enagas. We are now completing the pilot in our technology lab, and then by 2024 we'll be installing the demo plant. This is the technology that basically converts the you don't need electricity. This is from the solar radiation via photoelectrochemical process, you split hydrogen and oxygen. And so we believe that the main advantage is that it will be more efficient process. You don't go via electricity, but you go, it's one step in one device process, just to simplify it like that. And so we'll be developing it in Castilla-La Mancha, mainly around this project, but also, of course, considering new uses. And finally, in Murcia, there is also a green hydrogen platform based also on different companies there. And we are also consolidating a consortium to develop, also to install electrolysis and to consume hydrogen and foster new uses. So as you can see, Repsol projects include the developments and innovations through the entire hydrogen value chain, and we try to also implement technologies and bring innovation. And present also we are collaborating with, of course, EU programs and EU funds, and the photoelectrocatalysis technology received also EU collaboration and EU fund support for the demo plant. So these are my projects.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Let's move on to back to Dr. Gochemete. Dr. Metes, so what would you suggest are the key milestones that we need to look for in the coming years to see that whether the European hydrogen economy is advancing as expected?
I think we need to look at a mindset change. We need a proper mindset, like more concretely, we need a change in the value chain logic. As everyone mentioned, that there's several industries that will benefit from the hydrogen economy, and that requires quite close cooperation across industries. So we need to have the right demand pull and supply push. So public-private partnership in getting the infrastructure ready and getting the R&D needed. But of course, we need a lot of renewable energy to be able to decarbonize heavy industries and mobility and other sectors using hydrogen. So the focus should be, in that sense, on, as I mentioned before, where we could make targeted applications of hydrogen. So incentive schemes still are important, and companies are doing their best, and we hear that many companies have quite ambitious targets. When you look at like hydrogen projects globally, you can see that many of the announced projects are in Europe. So Europe has a great opportunity to become a world leader, but other countries will catch up. I'm currently in South Korea. Hydrogen is a really big topic. Australia is catching up. So I think we need to see that close cooperation across industries and public sector, and make sure that we capture this opportunity to also use hydrogen to not just transform the economy, but society, and think of also just transition and job creation as we slowly phase out fossil fuels and create job opportunities through hydrogen value chains.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mete. So let's move back to Monica, who I'm receiving a question from the audience, which is from Thibaut Binsdon, who is asking, where do you expect to be importing hydrogen in a few years' time into the Port of Rotterdam?
Okay, well, we're talking about shipping it, right?
Yes.
And first, it's always a difficult question, because I always am a bit worried that I forget to mention a country that's also important, because we're looking at quite a number of them. It's like when they ask who's your best friends, and then you forget to say thank you or to mention one person. But the first countries that spring to mind in Europe are Spain and Portugal, for instance. We're also looking very closely at Iceland, very interesting. Not solar, but different. Huh? And then, of course, Latin America, Chile. You may have seen the news on the MOU we have with the Ministry of Energy there. Also Brazil, where we have very good conditions around the port of Pecém. We work with them closely, and they're in Ceará. They happen to have also the best conditions for renewable there. And EDP have just announced they're starting an electrolyzer demo there, which is set up to scale up later. Canada, Morocco, Namibia, South Africa, maybe Egypt, that kind of countries. But also Australia, even though it's very far away and close to South Korea, where Roche is at the moment. Because we discovered that actually the cost of shipping isn't determined by the distance so much. It's mainly determined by getting it on the ship, getting it off the ship, but the distance, the number of miles it sails, is not so strong determinant. So that's very interesting, I think, because it means we can really look at where you can get the best supplies and bring them to the end users.
Great. Indeed, very interesting. Thank you very much. Maria, a question from you from Macarena Larrea is asking whether where do you expect to be there to be enough demand for your valleys, the ones you were showing us before? What are your demand estimations in that respect? And a related one, another question related is, and regarding these valleys of yours, is the Spanish hydrogen regulation in place, the necessary one to make sure these clusters function?
Okay, thank you. Quite complete questions. I will attack step by step, if I may. Okay, so I think the questions with respect of the demand are very important. And you are completely right asking that, because one of the project risks, not only in hydrogen, and even in oil and gas, are to overestimate the demand. And I think, of course, we speak about production, there are targets, but you need to have anchor demand. And this is why I think also Monica mentioned it, and Gochi mentioned it, and myself, I showed the map with the industrial centers, clusters, combined with port infrastructure. So there we can have anchor demand to substitute fossil fuel hydrogen with low carbon hydrogen, right? And then we can test and expand mobility machinery there in the port to expand to other users. Also, the big cities, Rotterdam, Tarragona, Bilbao, are close to the big cities, quite important cities. So also there are some commercial fleet, municipal fleet of buses, etc., who this type of transport will need to switch to these alternatives. So yes, of course, there is an overestimation of demand. This is why we go step by step. We don't imagine scaling up projects, but anchoring it to rather our own consumption as petrochemical needs, combining with the industrial consumers who are very close at the vicinity of these centers. So this is how we deal with demand. This was the first question. And the second question was Spanish regulation. Yes, I think, well, there was released already the roadmap in Spain on hydrogen regulation in line with the European one, also setting the targets, setting the development and the deployment of hydrogen-specific infrastructure. So generally, I think we are still operating in broad regulatory context. We'll still need it to narrow it and to put details. So it's one, of course, of another uncertainties, and we believe that in coming months, European Union will specify several doubts, starting from the terminology somehow of hydrogen, because to allow trade, to allow certification, standardization, we still need to have European own terminology. So starting with this, just probably so basic, towards certification and guarantee of origins. This is to allow to these products to be filled in the network, in the infrastructure, to ensure information to the final consumer about the renewable origin of this product and how much CO2 has been withdrawn in the process, which will allow the trade. So, of course, it's an uncertainty, but we believe that already the boosting, the mainstreaming of the main demand sectors are pretty much clear, let's say, at least in the European Union. And then we will try to put specific projects and, of course, looking for optimizing these projects. I think it's a huge work to be done by business side to find the best design, to optimize our project, to reduce the cost, and of course with the help of public funding for early development.
Great, thank you, Maria. A question by Javier Gomez, which you, Maria, touched upon, but I want to direct towards Dr. Mete. What sort of initiatives and how do we actually can figure out where and trace the hydrogen? Where is the hydrogen coming? What type of hydrogen is it? What is the carbon emission intensity of each type of hydrogen?
So obviously hydrogen currently is not coming from anywhere yet. But when will it arrive? Definitely we'll need guarantees of origins. There are currently industry-led initiatives. So we have Certify. This is one of the schemes if one wants to sort of improve their knowledge of what's going on, is to look at Certify is one of those initiatives. And then other countries like Australia is developing their own kind of methodology for calculating embedded emissions from hydrogen. So it's also quite important that this is compatible with the European methodology. And I know that, for instance, Germany's energy agency DENA and Smart Energy from Australia are cooperating as an example, and there are several examples of that to make sure that this happens, so that we can communicate to each other in the same language. There are sort of more kind of interesting digitalization initiatives as well from the US. There's the Energy Web Foundation that are looking at using blockchain to trade hydrogen and to be able to use blockchain technology for certificate schemes, and they have been testing it with renewables and it worked. So we might see that also happening. So digitalization could play a key role. Yeah, so I think these are the places, and I think it will be probably these countries. I don't expect, for instance, Middle East or North Africa to catch up with Australia because they're quite far ahead. But there'll be other countries. Chile is very advanced and they're quite ambitious on hydrogen as well. So that could be also another country that will lead, let's say, in the international race. And then countries like, I think, China and Korea, sadly, we don't have a lot of information. I don't know a lot about hydrogen production in China, but from my time in Korea that I know that it's just hydrogen, so it can be gray, blue, it doesn't matter. Of course, they have limitations on renewable production, but it's important, of course, that we focus on lower carbon alternatives.
Great, thank you. Let me do a last round of questions. And Dr. Mete, I'll stick with you and go back. So what do you think are the main, the big divisions or of opinions, let's say, when it comes to the current regulatory framework for hydrogen? What are the big debates around the framework in Europe?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess European framework will be a guide, but my sense is that countries are choosing also their own pathways. So from my conversations that I understand, some countries will only foresee a role for green hydrogen in their energy mix, and that's Sweden is an example. So natural gas-based hydrogen is not going to be produced here or used here. Of course, they have a lot of hydro, so that's one way to go. And then when you look at the UK, we have seen they recently announced the hydrogen strategy has a twin track approach. So they will be technology agnostic, and they'll be supporting both hydrogen production methods that are most advanced today, steam methane reforming with CCS and electrolyzer technology at the same time. So we will see these differences, but that shouldn't stop cooperation. So yeah, these will be the differences. I think countries will choose different technological pathways as and in line with the resources that are available to them to meet their
Great.
decarbonization targets. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's do a last round of interventions, perhaps starting with Monica. So, what would be a core message you would like to get out there if you could choose from thinking from the hydrogen strategy of the Port of Rotterdam?
Well, I think it's very important to show courage, because there's such a lot of hesitation in the market about demand and about the cost and being a first mover, being risky. I totally understand that. But I think, well, we're sitting in this foundation room where Repsol is also present, and there's probably a lot of listeners from the oil and gas industry. I think what I'm personally hoping is that the kind of courage and the kind of uncertainty that is normal in exploration of gas and oil, and the kind of capital expenditure, will hopefully be shifted more and more to what is now perhaps uncertain, the hydrogen production, and is there enough demand, is the customer price going to be good, etc., etc. But hopefully the capital intensive and also what we call hard to abate industries might actually help bring a huge turnaround here because of the nature of their business and the nature of their DNA. So it could be very interesting to see that happen. So I would say go for it.
Thank you very much, Maria Deriugina. What is your key message from Repsol's hydrogen strategy?
Well, I think that, as Monica mentioned, it's already a reality, and it is one of the future energy vectors. So energy carriers, energy vectors of the future. And I think we will have to combine the best low carbon solution and best hydrogen derivatives based on these very versatile and very diversified fuel, which I mentioned allows us different option, satisfy different demand. And I think this will be to find the wisest solution to contribute to technological progress, to decrease the costs, to contribute with commercial and standards to generate volume in order to trade it. Of course, I think on the European level, it will be important that there will be surplus, region with surplus, region with deficit, and there should be trade up to in later on. I think it has to be like a commodity, like today are other fuels. So we will be developing in this early stage to bring new use cases and to bring critical mass to the market.
Thank you. Monica wanted to add something before we close with Gochemete.
I'm really pleased with Maria's answer there as well. I was thinking about the green and the blue and the gray, and how some countries commit to green. And I think what we're looking at here is, since there's so little green hydrogen around, only 2% in the world, I think, what we're looking at is trying to find the best available alternative to move fastest to zero emission. So that's go for the best available alternative and don't debate too long, I think. Just go.
Thank you. And Dr. Gochemete, what is your message from Stockholm Environment Institute?
I just would like to say that we should, in all that, and I completely agree with the previous speakers, and my last message is that we should definitely make sure that we avoid carbon lock-in. So where it makes the most sense, we should directly go for the most clean technology and avoid further repurposing of unnecessary infrastructure. Thank
All right,
you.
thank you very much for all three speakers. Thank you for this great debate. We've had different perspectives, and I think it has fulfilled our expectations. We will be having more of these webinars as we have so far, and you'll hear from us soon. The audience will hear from us soon. Thank you, all of you, for putting some time for us here. Goche, Maria, and Monica. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.